suffragists, and actually grew up within 20 minutes of Robert Ingersoll's birthplace museum in Dresden, in Dresden, New York. Her doctoral work explores the history of feminism, radical religion, and free thought in the Finger Lakes region. She's a history teacher at Cayuga Community College, currently serving on the board of the Finger Lakes Women's Interfaith Institute in Seneca Falls, New York. Please help me welcome Melinda Gruby on the topic Burnt Over, Radicals, Religion, and Reform in the Finger Lakes, as we explore some of the topics of Ingersoll's oratory.
I don't normally dress this way. Well, I'm very interested in the history of 19th century feminism, particularly in the United States. And for me, historical research is a kind of necromancy, a kind of spiritualism, if you will, in which we seek to understand ourselves by exploring and thereby deepening our relationships to the dead. So for a moment, I call forth my great-great-great-grandmother, who grew up in Seneca Falls, in the heart of the burned over district. My name is Susan Bachhofen. I come to you today in deep mourning, having just laid my brother Peter, who died of a wound he received in the battle between the states, in a grave beside our mother in the cemetery in Seneca Falls. I cannot help but reflect upon where we came from, Peter and I, and why he felt he had to die to defend it. After my mother died in 1847, I spent much of my time on Cayuga Lake with Aunt Harriet and Uncle Julius Bull. They were station masters on the Underground Railroad and members of the biracial Wesleyan Methodist Church of Seneca Falls, the congregation that hosted the Women's Rights Convention in 1848, as well as other radical speakers such as Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. Today, the quiet farms and villages between Rochester and Syracuse show little evidence of the religious fires that once burned there, of the revivals with their thousands of believers, the utopian communities, the presence of ghosts and tipping tables, of new religions, radicals, and reformers. Theodore Well once preached a 3-hour temperance sermon that inspired rum sellers in Rochester to pour thousands of gallons of their product into the gutters. Years later, he wrote to his friend Lydia Maria Child, "The Holy Spirit did actually descend upon men and women in tongues of flame." Those were amazing times, radical times, and we were all on fire with passion for our work. There was great need of reform in the years between the Revolutionary and Civil Wars. Industry was growing, immigrants poured into the country. Our cities burgeoned, and always, people kept moving west. All of this expansion just exacerbated problems along with us: drunkenness, prostitution, slavery, inequality, poverty. Someone had to do something. Evangelicalism called on the individual to work in God's cause. The radical freethinker who rejected the fundamentalist church did not abandon this calling to serve humanity with fiery passion. The Quaker radical Lucretia Mott maintained her devotion to Christ, but she called him a bold nonconformist. I have found that folks like to believe that they would have taken their stand with the right in ages of the past. They would have stood with us. Perhaps. I dare say this audience would stand with us. We were nonconformists. We were radical, often perceived to be dangerously so. We were in a supreme and often despised minority. To understand us, you need to know our history. You have to understand the burned over district. In upstate New York, the spiritual and financial fortunes of the people intertwined. opened in 1825 and everything changed. As the economy boomed in places such as Utica and Rochester, the canal boats moved eastward with their tons of Genesee wheat and returned westward with passengers bound for a new life on the frontier. Increased industrialization, overcrowded agricultural lands, and waves of immigration from places such as Germany and Ireland ensured a steady stream of newcomers to New York State's interior. The profits of wheat production near Seneca Lake rose by 50% in 1825 after the canal came through. New York State's population soared. By 1830, New York was 50% larger in population than the next largest state, Virginia. You must understand, no one could have predicted this. 8 years before construction of the canal began, Thomas Jefferson wrote of the idea. It is a splendid project and may be executed 100 years from now, but it is a little short of madness to think of it this day. Even after construction, there were many who doubted the governor's pet project. They called it Governor Clinton's folly, the governor's gutter, that damn fool dig. Governor Clinton maintained his backing of the project that cost New York State $7,700,000. I can still hear the uncharitable rhyme, forgive me. Governor Clinton, they said, that federalist son of a bitch, taxes our dollars to build the ditch. And then, on October 26, 1825, the project was finished. We were the frontier. We used to be no place. And then, little more than a generation had passed between the first white settlements of western New York in the 1790s and the opening of the canal in 1825. To journey from the eastern populated areas of New York to the western interior used to take 3 weeks of difficult and expensive travel. Now the same journey could be accomplished in as little as 4 days, and with much less danger and in much greater comfort. Before the canal, Rochester's population was only a few hundred people. 15 years later, it had climbed to 20,000 people, and many of them only temporary residents. Young men and sometimes families came, worked for a spell, then headed further west to be replaced by new young men and new young families. They came from everywhere, and the old established families could not control them, could not understand them. People who worked on the canal, we call them the canalers, were a really rough lot. They used to say, you take 1 barrel of Erie Canal water and 2 gallons of alcohol. Then you add 2 ounces of strychnine, because strychnine is the greatest stimulant in the world, and 3 plugs of tobacco to make them sick. Any canaler wouldn't figure it was whiskey unless it made him sick. And 5 bars of soap to give it a head, half a pound of red pepper, and then you put in some sagebrush and boil it till it's brown. Straight into a barrel, and you've got your canal whiskey. Along the canal, towns seemed to burst out of the ground overnight with names like Millport, Lockport, Spencerport, Weedsport. The canal brought new opportunities and success, access to technology, new ideas. It also brought strangers from back east and further beyond. It brought Catholics and Jews and atheists, people with foreign accents and even more foreign ideas. 44% of the people of Rochester were foreign-born. Nearly half the residents of Buffalo were German. The large Irish and German immigrants were often at odds with each other. The Erie Canal gave upstate New York much of the cultural, religious, and ethnic diversity that was so very characteristic of New York City. But still, we had our rural feeling. We had a country attitude. The mixture could be explosive.